We're at my house and we've just been speaking to Tom Bardon from Green Man Learning. I had a really nice chat with him all about his wild passport and other stuff. I just want to say before I forget that my cat Oscar came and joined us for part of the chat, and it was really awkward because I really wanted to say out loud to Tom as well, like, if you can hear weird sounds in the microphone, it's not us, it's my cat, like purring and rubbing his bum on the fluffy microphone hat thing. So if you hear like some strange purring noises, that is actually Oscar, my cat, not me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was good. It was a good chat with Tom. Lots of big questions. I think it was a chat that with lots of big questions and not necessarily many answers, which I think, I can't remember, I heard somebody talking about philosophy the other day, and they said the goal is to have conversations where you come away confused at a higher level of understanding.
Oh yeah, nice.
So I just like that idea of like, have we solved anything? No, but we understand more and we know the same amount.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I hope that you listeners have not been too badly affected by storm. Is it Kiara or Ciara? I've not actually heard anyone say it out loud. Kira. It's spelt in a strange way. Yeah. Sorry if your name is... What is it? Kira. I can't
You're right.
say it. Yeah. I hope that she has not been as unkind to you as to us. It could be worse.
It could be worse. We've still got like 3 trees left, so yeah. I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right, enjoy.
Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.
Yeah, no, well, I've been putting off sharpening my knife since before Christmas, and I just thought, I'm just gonna have to sit down and get it done. So, but there's something. It's almost like that mind. Do you know that mindless, repetitive kind of task thing? It just helps you like unwind, and you don't have to concentrate what's actually going on in your hands. So I've actually been listening to a couple of your last podcasts actually while I've been doing it.
Yeah. I sometimes have daydreams about like going back to working in a factory. Because I just sort of think, like, it'd be so nice, just some days to just be like, I just put shit in a box, and then I go and.
What do you do in a factory, Lewis? Because I've been there.
Yeah, well, you go, I wouldn't have to wipe anyone's bum but my own.
But you don't have people do that for you.
No.
No, I worked in a factory, and I would not go back there. 12-hour shifts overnight and stuff. I wouldn't go back there if you paid me. Would not be my preferred way of spending my life, to be honest. What have you guys been doing? What have you been out about this morning?
We've had our toddler group this morning, parent and toddler, and also assessing lots of storm damage in the woods,
which
has been an expensive morning. I had a very friendly tree surgeon in to go, yep, that needs to come down, like, now. Very friendly, nice guys who were like clearing their schedule for us tomorrow. But yeah, it was a little bit like, oh, okay, right.
There's the tax payment for next year gone.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have your own woods the way you work? Where do you do most of your sessions?
Well, I started off kind of mobile. So, I mean, I actually live in South Yorkshire now, but I've always worked in West Yorkshire. So I've always been kind of mobile, going to school sites, and just after my second one born, about 6 years ago, we approached a local landowner about something else, and he just happened to mention that they rented woodlands. So we took it on about 6 years ago, and we've always done like holiday schemes and birthday parties and whatnot. But more recently, we're getting a lot more local schools coming to visit us, which is nice. But then, I mean, how big's your woodland? We're 12 acres, and it's incredible the amount of impact you have, even just using it, 2 or 3 days a week. So it's really difficult to kind of mitigate all that stuff.
Yeah, we're on just under 3, and I think it's the balance is like the smaller the woodland area that you're using, the more management you've got to do of like, okay, well, we'll actually just make a path and we'll wood chip it, and we put some almost not terracing, but you go, to combat the erosion, we'll put this stuff in. But the bigger sites, I think there's some guys up near us that have got, it's not their private woodland, but they've got use of 100 acres, and they just kind of, you just move around, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got 2 kind of sites within, but even rotating, once a year, they weren't having enough time in between to recover. So what I kind of said was, rather than having a smaller impact on a lot of areas, I'd rather have a massive impact on one area,
Yeah.
affect the others kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's something I wrestled with for a long time, because you can literally see the kind of degradation of the soil, can't, in the compaction.
Yeah.
And it's there is a guilt issue, but
yeah. We were talking about that recently, because we've been doing a lot of reading about earthworms, and it's like the more you find out about something.
Were you not going to do a podcast solely about?
We probably will at some point. But it's like the more you learn about something, the more potential for guilt there is, like you're describing. So, learn about earthworms and how much more incredible they are than I thought they were. And then I was just like saying to Lewis, like, it just makes me not want to let the kids dig anywhere. Like, they're not allowed to dig anymore. And then you think, well, actually, hang on a minute. That it's always a seesaw for a school, isn't it? It's like, yes, what they're doing may have a negative impact on it right now, but is there a balance of positive impact further down the line or later that day or whatever, that means that they care about worms because they've seen one close up? And
well, I think of it as like, we did that podcast ages ago about pulling the legs off a spider, and being like, if one spider gets the legs pulled off, but then you raise an etymologist who saves thousands of things, is it the same as like, okay, you run a forest school and you might have a really massive impact on 3 acres, 4 acres, but those children grow up and protect hectares of woodland.
Exactly. Although the other day is, if you're watching a child pull the legs off a spider, you're either going to raise an entomologist or a psychopath.
Yeah.
You just don't know, really.
You never know.
They're not mutually exclusive.
No. But no, I've always said that. It's about basically doing a kind of a risk-benefit writ large, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And talking to them about it as well, and kind of expressing your worries or doubts or concerns, but having a dialogue about it, I think.
Yeah, sure, I get that. Yeah, I don't know where I stand on that, to be honest. It's something I've struggled with. I don't think I could stand by and because I know some people. I remember when it all came to the FSA conference, and some people were that kind of in either camp about it, weren't they? And part of that play kind of thing. And for me, no, I don't think I could. I think that I think that disturbed me a bit too much. I'd have to kind of intervene, I reckon, there.
Changing subject slightly, what's been your route into forest school? Do you come from a teaching background or an environmental background, or what was your kind of?
No, I'm from a community health background. So, what year is it now? 2020. So, I can't remember when I started. Probably about 2004. I worked for a company. Years and years ago, there was the National Lottery gave out £1 million grants to set up what were called healthy living centres. Yep. And it was really kind of progressive, forward thinking, it's like what's the thing, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was all about preempting people, educating people so their health, didn't deteriorate later in life. So I worked for those in primary, doing kind of health stuff with children, mental health stuff, oral health, anger management. And then latterly I moved on to managing the Football Foundation gave us about a quarter of a million, I think it was. This was back when there were grants to be had. And we got about $250,000 to do a physical health project. So I managed that. And it was all aimed at, it was when obesity was like the kind of, childhood obesity was like the key word, and that was attracting a lot of funding from public health and education. It was about getting children who weren't very active involved in, well, not so much involved in sport, but more physically active. And whatever we did didn't work. We tried football, doing it different, packaging it different ways, dodgeball, cricket, nothing worked. And then I went to see Bradford Council at the time, had a really amazing play team. They invested loads of money, and they were really, they were doing loads of stuff. And I went to see a den building session that they ran in a local school. And I sat there for 2 hours, and these kids who I knew did not, join in with any of the games that we did. Just they were active for 2 hours.
Wow.
Moving, gross motor skills, all that kind of thing. All these things that we were looking to promote by doing sport, they were doing, naturally with then building and play. So, so then I got qualified again. Bradford Council, they invested loads of money into training. They paid for over about 5 or 6 years. They paid for loads of training for local staff to do their forest school level 1 and 3. So I actually got my training paid for by the council at the time. Yeah, it was such a good opportunity. Looking back now, it literally, I mean, you probably feel similar, but it literally changed everything for me. Absolutely everything. And then I worked for some extended schools partnerships, and then finally got made redundant 2 months after I'd had my first child. And set Green Man Learning up. And it was only ever supposed to be like I'll just do it until something else comes along. And then here we are, 8 years later. Else to come along. What about you guys? Were you both teachers in the previous life?
Yes, I was in secondary for 9 years, doing English and drama. So kind of in many ways completely unrelated, but always very interested in play. I think that's why I loved doing drama with kids, and the kind of and it being a bit more unstructured, a bit more child led in those lessons, which had upsides and downsides. When you were teaching year 9 drama period 6 on a Friday, and they've been literally forced to sit at desks every other session, and then they arrive with you and you're like, okay, let's go.
It must be that, because I do love drama. I was in drama groups as a kid, but I do know also at secondary school it were always seen as a bit of a cop-out lesson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As much as I love it, I do recognise that people did see it like that. So that coupled with the Friday afternoon thing was
I think it's because it's so close to play.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Maths is not the way that maths is taught is not close to play, but the way that drama is, it is close to play. So.
But you'd also used to get, like, especially in GCSE drama, you'd get quite a lot of kids who had been told or led to believe that they were not great at academic subjects, choosing drama, not because they liked it really, but because they're like, what else am I going to do? Like, surely it'll be an easier option or whatever. So you'd get a lot of the wonky kids, and that's what I really loved about it, because you'd start off the 2 years with like the most incredible bunch of kids, with some kids at the top going, I'm going to be a professional actor and my parents take me to the theatre all the time, and then like most of the other kids just going, yeah, it's a DOS in it, that's why I'm here. And you've got to somehow like bring these kids together and take them on a journey, and I used to really enjoy that, even though it was quite a challenge. And in some ways I think there are things that link up with Forest School there, if you see what I mean. About it being
with play. Absolutely.
Well, I taught in primary for I just about managed 2 years, which was, when you can think about, one of them was an NQT year, so I was on a reduced timetable. I actually only did 1 proper year of teaching, and then I had some bad experiences in that school and just kind of went, do you know what? I don't think I looked at jobs in other schools and kind of realized that the problems weren't going to go away. They might be less, but they would still be the same problems in another school.
They're systemic, aren't they? It's not about individual schools. It's about how the entire education system is structured and what it requires and all that.
Yeah. How long have you got? Because I can run.
Don't get him started.
The problem is, right?
Have you box as well, Lewis? I'm sat on mine currently.
It does link to it. I mean, one of the main things that made me leave teaching, and it's conveniently a thing we wanted to talk to you about, was I sort of fell. Maybe I examined the national curriculum in practice and went, I don't see that this is serving the children that I'm teaching.
No.
And just kind of sort of went, right, these kids are, so I was in year 3, 4, so what are they, 7 to 9-ish? And just so much of it, I just thought, well, this isn't relevant and you're not interested in it. And so I'm resorting to, coercion and sanctions and praise, and going, actually, do you know what you guys really want to know is, how do you cook bread, or how do you, run up and down the field without getting immediately out of breath, and stuff that you go, well, there wasn't time to do that because I was getting chewed out if I hadn't covered past participles in you know.
Yeah, I do know, because my little boy's in year 3 and he started bringing in spellings and past participle stuff, and it infuriates me, to be honest. It literally brings out like a Mr. Hyde side of me.
Yeah.
I genuinely, the same as you, I just don't understand the rationale for it, especially when a few years ago, when Mr. Gove was education secretary, and he was talking about having a future workforce that could come innovative and reactive and flexible. And I thought, but this system doesn't teach kids how to do any of that.
No.
And in fact, I mean, we're bound to say this, but that's the kind of thing that approaches like forest schools do emphasise. And if those are the skills you want kids to have, these are the approaches we should be using. So
yeah,
absolutely.
I read a thing a while ago that said, actually it was only a couple of years ago, and it said basically if a computer can do it now, regardless of the expense or the time, if you had to build a supercomputer, don't worry about it, because in 2 years' time that will be on your phone. And it basically said, if a computer can do it, don't waste your time learning it.
Yeah.
What is the fucking point? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I read a book a couple of years ago called Utopia for Realists, which was really good, and it talked a lot about universal income. And one of the arguments that, just like you're saying, 10 years from now, a lot of the jobs that people are doing will be kind of obsolete. And from a huge swathe as well, of different like strata of society. So from kind of really menial jobs right up to what I consider kind of quite middle class jobs now. So everything from like accounting to order picking to lorry driving and all sort of shades of grey in between. So yeah, I mean that adaptability and innovation and flexibility, I think it's absolutely key. But we don't kind of cater for any of that. It's really, this is what it is. This is black. This is white, and you will learn, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of So the reason I thought it kind of linked in was because you've been working on, and I think I'm right in saying you're about to run the first course of wild passport instructors.
That's right. Yes. It was one of those things. I launched the wild passport nearly 2 years ago now, and I thought, we'll do the first one this summer, and then here we are, nearly 2 years later, and I've only just managed to get my finger out and get it sorted. But yeah, it's next month. Is it February? Next month, yeah. So we're running our first level 3 wild passport practitioner training. We've got Lily Horseman Road delivering with us as well, which is like a real bonus because she's.
I wouldn't rate her. What she's doing.
Honestly, she's a really good. She's a really.
Oh yeah, I'm being silly. We've had Lily on the podcast, and she's.
I listened to it the other day. I did listen to it the other day, but so that's going to be great because. I mean, I've been running forest school for 10 years. It was 10 years last month. I did my training, and and I've done I've run bits of CPD and stuff. I work with Simon Turk quite a bit doing that kind of thing from tree creepers. But it's a different kettle of fish running an accredited course where you guys have just started doing level 3s, haven't you? Is that?
Yeah, again, we've got our first one in April. Yeah, like you say, having done some CPD before, that's very casual of like, exactly. It's similar to when we went from doing toddler groups and home ed days, and we've in the last 2 years been running an Ofsted registered kindergarten, and you go from like, we can do this and we can just kind of make it up, and then you go, there's a ton of legislation comes with this.
I've got to like toe the line a little bit now. No, so that's kind of where I am, and it's a bit. I'm excited about it, but kind of nervous in equal measure because you want things to be right and
it'll be awesome.
I hope so because I think do you remember when you did your level 3? How long ago did you guys do your level 3?
5 years ago.
4 years ago.
So do you remember that feeling once you'd done it and you were just completely psyched and you were just so inspired and like energized and all that? I mean. That to me, I think the level 3 training is an incredible experience, and I just would like to capture some of that, and have people going away thinking, oh, like open their eyes like to the scope of different things that are possible. Because the Wild Passport is a lot more about practical skills. There's a huge focus on the practical elements. I'm not a great shakes at all the theory side of stuff, but I do like to make things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the focus. So that's coming up, next month.
What led you to design the Wild Passport? What was your kind of inspiration for it?
I'd been toying with the idea for a long time, not fully formed, but when you've kind of got like a kernel of an idea. And I started first thinking about it in response to, I read an article about the inspiration for Forest School, kind of and it was, I think it was, they were talking about in Norway in particular, they were talking about all these kids who had their own knives on them.
Yeah.
Basically. And I thought, but interesting though, I mean, I'll come back to that because it does feed into what we're thinking about it. And the idea was that these kids were wandering around and using their knives whenever they felt free.
Yeah.
And I thought, as much as we've tried in Forest School for the last however many years to get to emulate this model, still within British culture, it wouldn't be seen to be acceptable for children to have their own knife. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when children want to use knives at our sessions, they come back to their knife use area and they sit down.
Yeah.
Overseeing. I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant if we could get to a point where we could just trust the kids to take the knives and use them appropriately?
Well, and also, it's not just necessarily about trusting the kids. It's about trusting your insurance provider that they cover your arse on that. Because, there are kids I would trust with that. I wouldn't necessarily trust all the other children in the group to be aware that that child was using a knife next to them. Do you know what I mean? And to behave appropriately next to them. But it's more about, just making sure, you've written down on your risk assessment that that's what's going to happen, and therefore that's what you do. And
and I think there's a difference in, I mean, there's two parts to it, isn't there? There's one part which is that, like, if we're getting technical about it, adults are not supposed to legally. Yeah. It's very difficult for an adult to carry a knife in this country, unless you are. It's like en route to a legitimate use or something, isn't it? So, that's right. Which, if questioned, I am always en route to a legitimate use because mine is in a knife pocket on my trousers that I don't take off. But I think part of the other bit is that in a Forest School setting, when you are using tools and stuff, you've got to not only consider your own use of the tool, but also be thinking, how are other people around you in relation to that tool? And that's a lot for someone who's particularly like younger. I'm thinking under 10. A 10-year-old could probably walk around and go, oh, I'm going to sit down here and do some whittling. But whether I would extend that to, they'll remember to take their knife with them. They'll remember that there are 6-year-olds walking around on the site. They'll remember that they, all those.
And also, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? So as you describe, Scandinavian country, whatever, where that's perfectly normal, and that's part of the reason that's normal for the children to have their own knives and to be able to use them safely and be trusted with that is that they've seen their family and friends do that. They're up their summer house or whatever. And everyone has a knife, and so it's modelled for them.
Well, I always compare it to, I don't even know if this is like an urban legend or whatever, but I always compare it to the tales that you hear about children being brought up in France, having a little bit of wine with their meals, so they're kind of, drinking when they become teenagers is a lot lower. And I think it's absolutely right. But my original point was just to get to that point where, children could do that. And I was listening to your podcast on Curiosity earlier on today, and you were talking about how sometimes a child might be saying, can I do this? And you'll have to say, I'm a bit busy with this at the moment. Can you come back later, kind of thing? Yeah. And just that entire idea of if we could somehow move a model towards this thing where children were able to do these things autonomously, that'd be the ultimate goal, basically. And I think almost like that's what we should be working towards. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think as well that comes with an amount of like I think one of the components if like thinking about Scandinavian countries is that they the forest school starts at birth basically and goes straight through, and there's no opt-in or out. And I think
Well, it's not forest school, is it? It's life. That's
yeah, but that's what I mean. And what's difficult, possibly in bringing one of the challenges maybe in bringing that here is that you might have some children who come to your forest school for 6 weeks. You might have some who come for a year. You might have, whereas if you went to those countries, you might have the forest school teacher knows the same group of children from when they're 3 to when they're 11, and you can build up that culture.
It's truly long term. It's embedded, isn't it? It's like it is the culture, like you say. It's and I suppose that's probably where forest school has always and probably will always struggle in this country, is in the sense that it's so alien to British kind of cultural values and norms that it'll always. I mean, I remember starting out on the look of horror on like a deputy head's face when you suggested that we might use a knife or use fire. And so you're always kind of fighting against that to begin with. And it's changing slowly and surely it's changing. But yeah, so that was where I started with the idea. And then over time, I kept coming up against schools and I'm sure you've had similar conversations where we like forest schools, but we want to get children outside. And it occurred to me at one point that the forest schools itself was kind of changing. How can I say this? People were changing what it meant because of their perception of it. And I think a lot of that was to do with the fact that forest schools was the only popularly known kind of training route into this kind of outdoor education. Yeah. So regardless of whether people needed that particular pedagogy and what it actually could achieve, they'd send members of staff on forest school training just because they wanted people outside.
And then they go, oh, hang on a minute, we don't actually want to let them do free play. We don't actually want them to be able to slide in the mud if they want to. We want them to take their topic of Vikings outside. And therefore, that makes sense.
It undermines the entire approach then, because, I mean, you've seen it yourself, the conversations that are on the various Facebook groups about, people suggesting topics, and then there's the counter argument of this isn't forest schools, and then there's the inevitable comeback of, well, at least they're outside, which, I don't disagree with. It is great they're outside, but at the end of the day, I recognise that forest schools is people have invested a lot of themselves and a lot of their energy and professional development into protecting and maintaining this approach. So I kind of got to a point where I thought, actually, in order to protect the integrity of forest schools, wouldn't it be nice if there was something else people could do that was more appropriate to what they actually want to achieve?
Yeah, and legitimate. I think there's a certain kind of ethos that comes around that's like forest. Some people kind of hold the belief that forest school is not just the only way to do outdoor learning, but it's the best way. And therefore, anyone who said they were going to do something like a topic then goes like, oh, well, you're being an absolute turd bag. But I can't remember who it was, but I saw somebody once describe it as an arrow in your quiver, and that forest school is one of the arrows, but outdoor learning is one of the arrows, and the wild passport is one of the arrows, and that you pick the best arrow for the target.
Exactly, and that's what it's about. And it's all about I mean, I remember writing in the wild passport in the introduction bit something along the lines of, nobody knows your setting better than you do. So, you're the one as a practitioner who needs to decide what's the best for your learners, what's the best for your setting. And it might be that in a sense that doing that little bit of that Viking topic is the payout, that you've got to make in order to get the kids out there. And to me, I understand why people get upset about that, but I also think that we just in the world in general, we're moving away from this idea of compromise, and we're moving to more polarized positions. And I think sometimes you've got to step back from that and go, well, I know this is what I want, but how I need to make these compromises in order to achieve what I want, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I mean that's another part of it, isn't it? I think, like I was saying, there's some people that think forest school is the only way, but I think there's a much larger group of people who, like yourself, go, it's absolutely fine if what you're doing isn't forest school.
Oh yeah.
Just don't call it forest school.
The issue is calling something that isn't forest school forest school. The issue is not like how dare someone go outside without their level 3. It's just that protection of a term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I dropped out then. I didn't catch that. Sorry.
That's okay. We're just saying about people wanting to protect the term forest school, not necessarily.
I completely agree with that. And I think that and this is what I'm coming back and saying. So now I think what we've got to a stage where forest school has just become shorthand for outdoor learning, I think. And I think that's a great shame, because I really do believe that forest school is, as a unique model, is a really important and valuable, like you say, arrow in that quiver. And so anyway, long and short was that I got approached by a school, and they kind of said, we want to go outside, but forest school isn't for us. And I said, well, listen, I've had this idea. I'll develop this idea. You can use it, but I'm going to kind of keep it and see where I can go with it, kind of thing. And so I wrote it over about 6 months. Coming home, not spending any time with my kids on an evening, and then we got to a point where we published it in 2018, and it's been really well received so far. We've had good feedback, and I'm just seeing where it goes now, and thinking about other little things to give added value to it. So I'm pleased with how it's gone so far, but I am aware, and I was always aware, that it had the potential to upset some people.
Yeah, well, I think we sent you some questions beforehand, and that was one of the biggest things that that made me want to kind of get in touch and talk to you about it, was compared to, you are by no means, like you said, the first person to go, hey, here's a curriculum or a progress chart or a set of certificates. But in comparison to what I have seen, I'm yet to see anybody have a massive go at you and at the Wild Passport, where I have seen people get very aggressive about much smaller things,
No, I have seen some of those as well, and I've kind of asked myself the same question. But I think the thing is, I think because I'd been a veteran of some of the kind of ongoing political fallout, a few years ago in forest school, and I'd seen how people could react, and I could understand the various viewpoints. I was always really conscious of this thing, and so from the get-go, I remember talking to Simon about this before, and that from the get-go, I'd said to myself, this isn't forest school. It's not, and I will not try and shoehorn it into forest school. I think it's got a place in supporting forest school delivery. I think it's possible to intertwine it, but if you're going to be absolutely pure about it, I personally don't think it is forest school. Like you say, it's just another arrow in that quiver, kind of thing.
And I wonder if that is what has made the distinction between the Wild Passport and some of these other systems, is that being open and upfront, and maybe people feel respected if you approach it as, I know this isn't forest school, but, as opposed to someone coming in and going, here's my certificate that says, well done, good firelighting, you're a bright star, to use in your forest school sessions.
Yeah, and it's the name of it as well. I think the name is very clearly different enough to forest school to make it very clear that you're not pretending it's forest school, or you're not kind of saying that it's something that forest school practitioners should definitely be using, whereas other systems that have been advertised and designed have called themselves like forest school progression measurement tool, or forest school certificate system, or rewards system, or whatever. And that's what puts people's backs up, I think.
And I do get why people's backs are flooded, but I also have a kind of feel a little bit sorry for people being on the receiving end for that, because I know where they're coming from as well. Because having been in schools and people saying, "Oh, we need this progression in our forest school." I mean, you guys are self-employed or have your own company, so it's sometimes really difficult in a difficult like economic environment to say, I'm not doing that because that is not forest school. And I sometimes feel like this gets leveled at teachers quite a lot. Say, I remember an argument with, I think it was a teaching assistant who was running their forest schools, and said everybody was saying you shouldn't be doing topic stuff, and I was like, but this is that person's job. You're not in a position of power when you're a teacher or a teaching assistant, and your senior leadership team are saying you need to justify this time. It's really difficult to turn around and say, I'm not. Well, I don't even think it's possible to turn around and say, no, I'm not doing that.
And like you say, that forest school has become the shorthand. So I know people, and I've had personal experience with schools where we've even tried to kind of say, oh, I'm happy to keep doing this with whatever progression system you want to put in place, but could we call it wild school or nature school or something else? And that sticks for about half a minute until one of the teachers just offhanded goes, right, it's forest school this afternoon.
Exactly.
And you go, right, you are fighting a very big cultural tide to try and push back the other way and go, it's almost like sitting in a little dinghy as a tsunami comes, shouting, "It's not really forest school yet," and that tide is just going to wash over you, isn't it?
You're absolutely right, and it almost sometimes just feels a bit kind of futile and a bit pointless. And you kind of in that scenario, and you've got the kids going, "We're still going to forest school," and you're going, "No, it's outdoor." I was doing outdoor learning. It was completely structured in a playground. There weren't an inch of nature. I was doing activities about science and Vikings, and the kids were still coming into the playground going, "It's forest school," and I'm like, it's not. I mean, it's genuinely not. But like you say, it was just like it was trying to herd cats. You just couldn't do it. Kind of like it just wasn't sticking at all. They knew it as forest school, and that's what it was. And in a sense, it's like a lot of words in language in general. They enter this common usage, and then they lose all kind of their original meaning. Is that the word we all think of? Not all of them probably broadcastable, but that have lost their original meaning, and I think it's got to that same point. So I do feel sorry for those people who've received stick for it, because I understand why they've done it. I just think sometimes, like you say, perhaps not realising just how heavily invested people are in the idea of forest school as its original idea, and purely its original idea.
And how many people have in those Facebook groups and communities and things, how many people have lost out on work because they held up what they believed were the principles? If you're sat there going, well, I turned down work because they wanted me to put that in, and then you see lots of people going, oh, I'm doing curriculum stuff, I'm doing topic-based stuff, it's just a sort of survival instinct, isn't it, of people going, you almost feel like you've been put out on your own and going, oh, well, why didn't you guys stick up for it? Why didn't
It's like a union, isn't it? It's the whole kind of discussion around the Forest School Association, and some people love it and some people really don't. But it's kind of like, I feel almost like it is the closest that we've got to a union. And it doesn't have any necessarily like legal standing, but it is a useful resort in those situations. Maybe
I agree.
Unionize.
I love a union. I think there's another difficulty here, though, and that is, and I've always thought this about forest school, that it's really difficult. If you went to visit 10 forest schools around the country in different settings, they'd all feel different. They'd all have different ways of doing things, different routines. And so it's almost like forest schools is, different things to different people. It's really hard to pin down the definitive, this is what it is. So you'll speak to some people and they'll do like our holiday stuff that we do in our private woodland. That to me is Forest School. We turn up, we've got a bunch of kit, we have a bare bones structure. We're going to start off with an introduction, maybe play some games, we'll have some food at some point, but then the rest of the day, go do what you're doing, kind of thing. And that to me is Forest Schools. However, I know that, and I think you guys managed to do that in your kindergarten stuff. It's really child led, but I also know that there's a lot of schools that can't manage to do that. They don't have either the length of time with the children in the sessions or the length of time over the number of weeks. They might be working with full classes. They might not really have a woodland at all. It might just be a bit of playing field. So Forest Schools really is such a diverse concept that it's difficult to say, I think, that this is what it should be or what it should look like.
It makes me think of that quote. I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody who was asked how they would define pornography, and he said, "I can't define it, madam, but I know it when I see it." Which is that? I think it's that kind of thing. It's like you could probably spend 3 hours defining what Forest School isn't.
Yeah.
In a way, you could never define what it is.
I was thinking, well, I guess that is maybe when you go back to the Forest School Association's principles, and I think they are quite good. I think they're pretty on it, and it's quite easy to kind of use. The ones that have caused the most controversy are about length of commitment kind of times, aren't they? So so you might say, like, I completely agree with you about your description of holiday clubs in terms of that kind of child-led, absolute kind of real pure essence of Forest School. But then if you looked at the 6 principles, you might go, oh, hang on a minute, but they're not coming to the same location with the same group, at least every fortnight for at least, is it 12 weeks now?
12 weeks, yeah.
And so you go, oh, okay, well, it can't be according to the FSA. And that's where people often, in these discussions really are like, that really gets my goat, because I spend my whole time really trying to aim for this like pure Forest School ethos. But because it's sporadic, and that's often a problem with schools, that they cannot commit to the same class going out on a Wednesday afternoon for longer than a half term.
Well, I do think though that, I mean, one of my hopes in the recent changes is that as Ofsted now have moved away from these results things and more to, I can't remember what the phrase is, broad and balanced curriculum, that you can argue that Forest School will benefit your Ofsted report in a more concrete way. I'm not saying that Ofsted is the be all and end all by any means, but if I put on my like imaginary head teacher's hat and try and empathise with what are they trying to get out of it, that if Ofsted are coming and they're coming to look at results, you could internalise and look at Forest School as times spent away from spellings or away from SATs prep. But if you knew someone was coming to assess you on a broad and balanced curriculum, then Forest School is much more valuable as a tool in your arsenal. And
well, it's really interesting you say that though, Lewis, because the end of last school year, I had a long-term contract of mine say that because Ofsted had introduced that, they wanted me to start doing curriculum stuff as part of my Forest School session. So again, which I found really surprising. I remember actually putting something on the Facebook, and but again, it comes down, and going back to the principles, it's all about how people interpret things. And I remember there being a big debate about the term that's used in the principles, because it's not about child-led, is it? It's learner-centered. So, I mean, that could be open to a fair amount of debate as to how that's applied. So, learner-centered doesn't necessarily mean, or doesn't have to necessarily mean that, you're absolutely following, that child's interest. You could say, well, actually, as a practitioner, with my experience, not just as a Forest School leader, but my previous experience as a childcare expert, a teacher, or this, then I can see that this learner's needs are these, or I feel that this learner's needs would be met in this way. So you can actually maybe take a different tack that the child perhaps wouldn't choose to do, but you feel it might be of benefit to that learner.
I think there's a bit there as well where I kind of think of that. that spectrum of learner-centered or child-led, and I kind of visualize it as like, how frequently are the children given an opportunity to feedback or give their input? Because you
Yeah.
have a session where you go, actually, every half term the children tell me what they'd like to do in the next half term, and then I plan out 8 weeks of sessions based on what they told me. So it is child-led, but then we have a structured thing. Or you could go, they decide, they review at the end of the session, what we're going to do next session, but then that's set in stone. Or you could have, like we're describing with these holiday clubs, almost just a whirring clock of like every millisecond the children are able to decide what they're doing.
And that's really difficult to cater for, really, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that you
go on.
I was going to say that, and that part of, I think what's difficult is that if you were being completely learner centered in that really narrow, end of the spectrum, you would have to have one-to-one adults to be able to facilitate everything and go, your every whim and desire, I will do it. But like we said in the last podcast, when you have to go, I really appreciate that you want to do knife work, but you just need to mediate that with, there's only 2 adults here, so maybe that'll have to wait 5 minutes. That's, you've already taken a step away from the most extreme.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and the other thing, I was thinking about this morning with a group that I'm working with from this school that caters for children with, emotional and behavioural needs. And oftentimes they find it really difficult to initiate their own play and to, kind of decide what they want to do for a variety of reasons. It might be something to do with like their neurological diversity, or it might just be the fact that they've never had the opportunity to play. And when I used to do community work, I remember clearly we used to do surveys of older people and say, what would you like to do in your area? And because a lot of people have never been given a choice, it's really difficult to say, oh, this is what I want to do. So, I mean, in a sense, this is another reason I quite like the model of the Wild Passport, at least as an introductory tool, is it kind of models a lot of options that you can, almost like a menu. These are the things that are available to you.
Yeah, I was just, as you were saying that, it made me think about when I was new to Forest School, and after I'd done my training, the first things I did were parent and toddler groups, but at the same time going into primary school. And exactly as you're describing, I've just remembered that it almost doesn't, you almost can't have pure Forest School with a brand new group. If they've never done it before, they can't do it, because as you say, they don't know what's allowed. So you almost have this kind of more structured beginning, I feel, where you are presenting, going, oh, these are the kind of things we can do. Let me model for you.
It's like building up a library,
Yeah.
so it's like you have to introduce one book at a time, so that eventually you can look at a bookshelf and go, which book would you like from the shelf? And then eventually you go, which book would you like from the library?
Yeah.
But you can't just show them the library.
I mean, in terms of the knife skills that we do through the Wild Passport, I talk about it in terms of building a vocabulary of knife cuts. So, for example, when children start carving, you'll have seen that they always do just the sharp point is the first thing that they always go for. And those are the building blocks of a lot more diverse language. And the more kind of words you teach them in this knife vocabulary, as it were, this lexicon, the more skills they can build up and the more complex things they're able to do. So you start off by teaching them, like you said on their first session, maybe simple things they can do. You can climb a tree or you can build a den. And then once they've got those simple ideas, they start to expand on those naturally through their play and kind of grasp more complex ideas. So a den might start off as being just a tarpaulin draped over a branch, and then it starts having guy ropes, and then they start building doorways and paths and gardens, and it evolves, doesn't it? The play evolves. And I think in a sense that having a kind of progression of skills, it happens naturally sometimes, doesn't it? As they're learning. But also if you can support that, and you can recognize actually these children are reaching the end of this part of den building, they've mastered these skills, but they don't know where to go with it next. By introducing something and saying, have you tried this, what about this, and teaching those skills, then it gives them another more advanced platform on which to elevate and expand their play opportunities as well.
I really like that. I really like, and I guess the idea that you could follow the wild passport, and then once you've kind of done that, wow, like then you could begin doing some incredible real forest school. I was also, there was an interesting discussion on one of the groups recently about children kind of getting stuck in cycles of like repetitive cycles of play. I don't know if you saw it. And there were some quite interesting different responses to that about, like, I can't remember what it was. It might have been throwing or something like that.
Yeah.
And someone that's saying, oh no, they really want to throw, and so but they don't want to do anything else. And I've tried this and I've offered this and they've done all that, and now they still want to throw, and that's all they want to do. And people were like, some people were like, well, if that's what they need, that's what they need. You know, the rest of their life is structured and they're not allowed to follow their own interests, so just let them go with it. And then some other people going, I'm not actually sure about that. I think that sometimes getting stuck in that cycle shows you they don't have the ability to progress, and so you need to be more. You need to facilitate more progression through slightly more structured activities, which is, I guess, is what you're describing in terms of giving them skills to then.
Can be, definitely. But I mean, you guys will use provocations all the time as well, won't you? Do you know? And do you not find that introducing bits of new equipment also? Do you know, like in early years they kind of take toys away and put them away and then bring out new things. Well, sometimes I feel that, so I might not take a spade for a few weeks, and then I'll take it, and then that'll be used for a few weeks, and then I'll take that away and I'll put some hammocks out that haven't been out for a few weeks, and they can structure the play around those things as well. So there are different ways of doing it, aren't there?
Yeah. And I think to an extent the environment does that for you, in that you as a if you're designing a classroom, like you say, in early years classroom, you have to be the one that goes, that toy is going away and this toy is coming out. But if you're outside in nature, you go, actually the opportunities for hide and seek are different now because it's autumn out as opposed to summer. And then you go, oh well, this tree is bigger than it was 5 years ago, so now we can climb that on it. I was just wondering, when you were saying about curriculums, I think it maybe made a light bulb in my head go off, that one of the things that can be so it sits kind of uncomfortably with me, is like the balance of intrinsic motivation and like coercion, and where you sit with that. And it kind of, that idea, a curriculum could be seen as the first step towards like, I now have to coerce you into progressing, because progress is the name of the game, and that's how I will be assessed. And so then you're I'm spiraling very, very dramatically here, but then you could see it as like, I'll no longer be responding to your needs because my need is to show a tick in the box. And so I don't care that you want to play hide and seek today. You need to get onto knife skills 4 because you've been on knife skills 3. So sit your butt down,
And I think that's a very real concern. And I think one of the things that I always say about the passport is I designed it to be flexible. Use it as best benefits your learners and your setting. And I mean, one of the other things I think that you need to think about is that actually, whilst it looks like the kids being coerced, actually the leader's being coerced there as well, because they're being and I think so. I do see that, but going back to what I said earlier about sometimes, you've got to give a little bit of what is asked of you in order to get the the thing that you're wanting to do. And so what I'd say is that in that kind of aspect, it's about how best to make them meld together. And so, I mean, we'll often in forest schools, while the kids are off doing their other things, doing their own choice, we might have an arts and crafts idea out for that day, or we might say, all right, we're making some mallets today. And it's just about making, rather than coercing, saying you've got to sit down and do this knife skill today, it's about having that knife skill available, so that the children can access it if they choose, but without saying you've got to. So, for example, the school I mentioned earlier, who wanted me to do more curriculum stuff in the forest school session in response to the Ofsted, asking for a broad and balanced curriculum. What I've started doing there, instead of changing it and going, right, we're all doing this today. So they're doing about volcanoes and the violent earth. So I had a bottle rocket, and I just said, I'm going to be over there doing the bottle rocket. And if you want to come over and have a go, you're more than welcome. If not, just carry on with whatever you chose to do. And children naturally come over and have a go at different things anyway. Some don't. And I think that's the balance between make it an option and saying 15 kids came and took part in the the progressive skills activity today, and the other 15 did their own thing. Those other 15 might come and have a go next week. So, like you say, it's about offering it without coercion.
Yeah.
And it is a difficult balance to strike. But like I say, I think this is from an ideal point of view, they wouldn't have to do this. But from a pragmatic and realistic point of view, a lot of teachers are being asked to do this. And so it's about saying, well, what can we do? We might not want to do it, but we have to do it. What can we do in a way that impacts on the rest of the approach to a lesser extent, and maintains the integrity as much as possible whilst meeting these new demands that are being placed on us?
Yeah.
So kind of to sum up what you're saying is, if people like and believe in Forest School, then it's in their best interest to tell everyone about the Wild Passport and get as many people trained in it as possible. Is that what I'm hearing, Tom?
Yeah, that's the tagline.
You've also got a training day which looks so fun. I wish we were closer because I would definitely come. With Simon from Tree Creepers on launching projectiles. Yeah. Oh my god!
Yeah,
be on that training. Please do it again, further south.
You ask Simon, who's not far from you. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to come down. Simon and I have got a really kind of similar idea on these things. We run training on things that we'd like to do, and I think a lot of people we kind of hit upon an idea. I'm telling you my secrets here. We kind of hit upon an idea, and you might have found this as well. But when you're offering CPD, a lot of people don't want to learn skills on their own. What they want is ideas.
Yeah.
People want to go away and go, now I can do this, this, and this with my group. These are ideas that I can offer to my group, and and we can do this at school next Tuesday with Year 6. If you're just doing knife skills as a standalone thing, that doesn't
too abstract.
Exactly, yeah. And so I suppose. So we come up with these ideas and go, like we did a toy making one that was really good fun. And we did one we call 5 in 5, where it's just 5 new ideas, and that format really seems to work. But basically, we just like to. I suppose Simon and I have always had this shared thing about like an orthodoxy in Forest School. This is how you do it, and this is why you do it. And over time, I think we've moved away from that a little bit, and it's kind of. Why are we doing this? I know we got taught this on our training, but why are we actually doing this? Is there a better way of doing this? Is there a different way? Is there a justification for actually doing this? And so we kind of bring that to our training a little bit, in the sense of, actually, you might have always done it this way, but what about this? Do it this completely different way, and it translates really well, and we just have a lot of fun, really. And it's quite subversive, and there's a kind of anarchic kind of thing going on.
It sounds really good. Just to finish it up, if people are listening and they do want to find out more about what you're doing and about the Wild Passport, where can they go to find out more about that?
Also, I'm on Green Man Learning on Facebook, and there's also a Wild Passport page on Facebook, and both have their own websites. And I'm a bit of a social media addict as well, so I can usually be found knocking around, commenting on stuff in threads, so people are welcome to message me or email me. That's not a problem. I'm always happy to chat about things, and offer any support or anything that I can.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time and for chatting with us this afternoon.
And we didn't even get on to like nerdy, geeky play stuff, so we'll have to have like another chat about that at some other point.
Guys, thanks ever so much.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, Tom.
Cheers.
Bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.